and welcome to episode number 7 of The Pitcher or the Hitter, the podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League. I'm Cam Kane, and I'm joined today by a special guest host, Zane Harding. How are you doing, Zane?
Good. I was wondering if you'd introduce me as Sahil, and then I could go, I'm not Sahil, or something like that. But no, it's good to be here. And even though Michigan football just wet the bed, I am still in high spirits and ready to talk about some major moves coming with these roster cuts and talk about how the league's kind of trending.
Yeah, like you said, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. First, we will talk about the roster cuts. A lot of big names cut in between late last weekend at the beginning of this week. And yeah, you want to get straight into those?
Yeah, sure. I guess we can kick it right off with the cuts that Anthony made late on Sunday night. The triple threat. Actually, no, he only cut 2 of those guys then, but a couple hours later, he cut Ryan Reynolds. So he cut
1:41 a.m. What a great time.
Yeah, 1:41 in the morning. Late night roster cuts.
Yeah.
So he cut Ken Giles, Sean Doolittle, and Ryan Reynolds in one 3-hour swoop there. Actually, he had to clear out a lot of spaces, as we all know. So he also cut Jose Alvarado and Jose Quintana in the late night 1:40 to 1:45 a.m. span. So Cam, I'm curious to hear. I know that there's one guy out of these 5 that stuck out to you enough to pick him up. But if you have any thoughts on any of these guys, I am all ears.
Yeah, so I guess we can start with that one guy, Jose Quintana. I picked up pretty much immediately. That was 1:45 a.m., so I guess he made 2 at the 11 o'clock hour and then 3 more very early Monday morning. Quintana has just had really solid peripherals the last 2 years, even when he has had high ERAs. This year, he was hurt for much of the year, but I still believe he's a guy who's worth rostering. I believe he's definitely a good bounce-back candidate. If he fits, whether or not he fits on my roster as currently constructed, that's to be determined. Maybe I could find someone else who wants to trade for him. But I do like him a lot. And I think if he's healthy this year, he's going to certainly be an above-average starting pitcher.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Quintana will be turning 32 late this January. So he's entering his age 32 season. I, for one, have rostered plenty of pitchers above the age of 32 in my first 3 years. And if you're looking at his stats here, 2019, Jose Quintana goes out. Really low walk rate, 2.42 walks per 9. He's keeping the ball in the park every year. And his strikeout numbers, actually last year, in his 1 start and 3 other appearances, went up a bit. But in general, he strikes out a decent number, if not spectacular numbers. But the peripherals are good. I definitely see why you picked him up. I mean, if you take out 2020 right there, those past 4 years, he's averaging what, like 3.5? I'm just doing this in my head, but it looks like he's averaging somewhere between 3.5 to 4 WAR per season, which is really, really good. And the ERA numbers are not great, especially the 4.68 ERA in 2019. But if you go down and look through his FIPS the past few years, 3.80 in 2019, 4.43 in 2018 is actually worse than the ERA, but that was the 1 year that he's kind of struggled in a full season since he debuted in 2012. And the year before that, 3.68 ERA, the season he got traded to Chicago, across town in Chicago. I think it's a very good pickup, and I honestly think I should have considered it more, looking for a potential number 2 not even a number 2 starter necessarily, but I have a spot where I'm going to have to stream a starter in order to hit my innings limit. And Quintana might have been the right guy for that.
Well, I can still trade him to you.
That's very true.
Yeah, I'm not sure what a trade like that would look like, and I probably would be hesitant because his value is lower than I think it's going to be in a few months. But yeah, have any of Anthony's other cuts stood out to you, Zane?
Yeah, Ken Giles might not be the best piece to roster right now, just given the injuries and recent performance. But it was surprising to see a guy with 53% of teams in ESPN rostering him get cut. Additionally, Brian Reynolds is being rostered in a lot of leagues, but God, he was awful last season. So I understand that cut. I do think the most intriguing one to me, besides Quintana, was the other Jose cut off of Team Resnick, Jose Alvarado, because Alvarado missed a lot of time this year, and he's still like, I don't know, he's one of the bullpen arms that has intrigued me most in the past couple of years. And while I don't think even I with my bullpenning strat have the space to roster him right now and see how he does next year, I do think he is a very interesting bounce back candidate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I believe Quintana is the only one of these that have been picked up since then. Yeah, I would like. I don't think Sean Doolittle's really worth diving into, but I do want to give a shout out to Brian Reynolds. 2019 did bat 314 with the crazy unsustainable BABIP, but this year his BABIP was perhaps unsustainably low. So maybe he's a bounce back candidate. He did really struggle this year, but he still is owned in over 40% of leagues. I'm a little surprised to see Anthony cut him, but he did have to cut a lot of people. But yeah, Brian Reynolds, I came close to trading for him from Ruthvik last summer, but didn't end up pulling the trigger. I think he's someone who still, he's very young and could, and a team like Conor or a team with maybe like Yuki that doesn't have a lot of bats could pick him up and do good things with him. Yeah, I'm a little surprised Eric hasn't picked him up yet, actually.
He does feel like an Eric bat.
Speaking of Eric bats, Eric did drop a bat in this window as well. He cut CJ Cron.
Yeah, I think the CJ Cron cut makes sense given how Eric's trying to configure his roster right this second. But I do know I'm willing to guess that was a tough cut for Eric to make, even with the small sample of 52 plate appearances in 2020. Just seeing his walk percentage skyrocket from his normal like 6% rate, maybe career, maybe even a bit below that, to 17.3%. It was just like, what on earth is going on? I think he's a compelling first baseman to gamble on in 2021. I'm even tempted to try him out in the first base, third base platoon that Joey Votto is inevitably going to form, seeing that I can only play him certain days in certain matchups. I'm curious to see if someone picks up CJ Cron.
Yeah, I am too. CJ Cron had a very odd season, I'd say. His exit velocity dropped over 5 miles per hour in this past season, but yet his slugging percentage shot way up from 469 to 548. And it's weird to see how those things can both happen at the same time. So he'll be an interesting guy. I'm not saying he'll be good next year, but I'm very curious to see what next season looks like for him.
Yeah, I'm curious to see where he lands too. I think there's a legitimate possibility that he ends back up in Detroit. Coach Hinch and his staff have to be looking at even the short-term peripherals that came out of last season and be looking at his 2018 numbers with the Rays and thinking, man, we should give this guy a look. I mean, 2019, he was actually below average in the offensive component of WAR because of his the fact he plays first base. But even that season, 25 home runs, 24 doubles, and the Tigers need that firepower. So I wouldn't doubt him coming back and having ample opportunity to play. He just needs to go back out and play a full season again.
Yeah, I agree. He's never had a bad season at the plate, so I think he's certainly worth rostering. Yeah, the next guy who was cut just after noon on Monday, Ruthvik and Nick cut Chris Archer from their roster.
Yeah, this one I was talking to Sahil about this one a little bit, and it's very understandable because Archer's just looked like a shell of his former self for a little while here. Even when he was healthy for a second there, he just did not look the same in Pittsburgh. His 2019 stats were just rough all the way around. Walking over 4 guys per 9, giving up nearly 2 home runs per 9 innings, 5.19 ERA, 5.02 FIP. This could be a reclamation project for a team, depending on where Archer lands. Actually, if he were to land maybe back in a place like Tampa, I would be compelled to pick him up, but hard to roster him right now, not being sure where he's going and how he's going to recover from injury.
Yeah, I agree. He's for the past few years been more of a name than an actual fantasy asset. But I do want to say well done to Anthony for being able to get Dane Dunning for him. And Dunning pitched really solidly in his first crack at the majors.
Yeah, I guess Chris Archer has been, both in real life and fantasy, a great guy to trade away to a team trying to make a little move for a compelling future piece, or if you are the Tampa Bay Rays, the entire core of your team moving forward for the next 5 years.
Pretty much. I mean, they haven't even seen Shane Baz yet.
Yeah, exactly.
God. Yeah, and Dane Dunning's a guy in our league who just gets thrown in a lot, but if he sticks with Anthony's team, he could have a winner there.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of throw-ins in our league so far have turned out to be guys that should have been kept all along. Case in point, Cabrian Hayes has been traded around, 8 times now? I've sent him away twice, and now he was traded for a haul by Conor to Andrew. Not to mention guys like Will Smith, also not the one untouchable player on Andrew's roster, reportedly was traded. I think I've traded him away at least once, if not twice.
Yeah, a lot of just all these catching prospects are just going back and forth. Dalton
Yes,
Varsho, Will
absolutely.
Smith, Sean Murphy, and now they're all kind of reaching the majors now at the same time.
Yeah. Another guy I want to look at, just touching on for a second, there are a few guys that I don't think are worth a ton of time, but just the Monday afternoon and evening flurry of moves. Andrew dropped Jacoby Jones. I dropped Jeremy Jeffress. And Sahil dropped Manuel Margot. Just running down the list real quick, for me, Jacoby Jones did experience a bit of a breakout with Detroit this year, but his numbers were going down already within like a short little span. A lot of people around here still love the potential, but I don't know. He's just not a consistent player. And then Jeremy Jeffress, as we all know, I tried to sell for a third, but everyone is seeing that his peripherals were actually slightly worse than last year. And last year, he was unrosterable. So he's another guy I was thinking about. And Manuel Margot just has no power based on what we've seen from him so far in Tampa. I know that he had a little bit of power in San Diego, but that is tough to roster. When I had Malik Smith, I was doing it purely for the steals, but the power outage that came from that spot was really awful for our team at times. Do you have any thoughts, Cam, on any of these guys?
Yeah, I'll touch on Margot a little bit since he got me some really clutch stolen bases towards the end of the season. He's a guy pretty one-dimensional. He's going to get you stolen bases occasionally and not much else. And I think maybe a team near the bottom of the standings could try and roster him and see if he can get a 340 on base percentage and hit a couple doubles. But yeah, I cut him. I was a tiny bit broken up about it when I cut him. Sahil swooped him up and clearly thought he could try and get some sort of return for him, and that didn't end up happening. So I guess the interest just isn't there. Even if that's essentially what Byron Buxton has been doing.
Yeah, and looking at Margot's transaction history just within this year, he has gone from Conor to Ruthvik and Nick, who dropped him 2 days later, and he wasn't picked up again until the end of August. That trade happened early February. He gets picked up by Yuki for 3 days, gets dropped. A week later, you pick him up, run him for a month, then drop him at the end of your playoff run. And then Sahil picks him up for 10 days, trying to trade him to no avail while he's playing well in the postseason. So that's 5 out of 12 teams in the league right there. Sahil checked in with me. I told him I'm not interested in a guy who hit 1 home run all season and had single-digit doubles to boot. So that's half the league right there. That wasn't interested in him. So I don't know if I see him getting picked up right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. One guy I want to touch on very briefly, Justin Dunn. Anthony cut him about 24 hours after his first flurry. And he was maybe one of the first guys who was a former big prospect who has been given up on by this entire league. So that's a little sad, and he was not very good this year. And he's just barely over the 50 innings limit, so you can't stash him in your minor league roster anymore. And I guess we're going to be seeing a lot of those guys coming soon. So he's just kind of, I guess, the face of what I would call the upcoming list of failed prospects that we're going to have to reckon with in the next year or so.
Yeah, I agree. And there is reason to believe that he could be a compelling reclamation project for a team next year. And not even a reclamation project, really. You just have to hope that he doesn't have another blow up start or two like he did this past season. Like the 4.34 ERA is definitely being inflated by his August 17th start where he gave up 6 earned runs in 2 innings to the Dodgers. Because right after that, he posted 3 straight quality starts, 2 starts in a row, actually, where he went 6 innings, giving up only 1 hit. He's not a good strikeouts guy so far. He's had issues with his whip because he's walking multiple batters practically every single game. But he is young, and he has given a few quality starts here and there to teams. So, I don't know. Just turned 25. The WAR was bad. The FIP was awful, 654. I'm curious to see if anyone gives him a shot next year, but I don't know. He was the Mariners' number 26 prospect, so expecting too much from him would have been bold by any team.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe he's worth a roster if you're Andrew, but I don't know.
Andrew, pick up Justin Dunn.
I mean, yeah, when I was at the bottom of the league, I'd pick up guys who were just past their prospect stage and see if they can stick on my team, and that's why I have Trent Grisham now.
Yeah, that worked out amazingly. Another guy I want to touch on, speaking of prospects that you can't stash anymore, 25-year-old Danny Jansen will turn 26 early in this upcoming season, and this past year put up a positive WAR in 43 games. He's now put up 2.6 WAR over his first full season and change in the league, which is really good, but it's off of his defense. He has an 80 WRC plus career so far, sub 300 on base percentage, and there is power there. There are some doubles there, but I don't know. He's a borderline starter, I think, but not quite worth the roster spot, at least for me. If I was really desperate to try and find a catcher for next season, if Darno went down, I'd probably pick him up, actually. But we have Contreras now. So what are your thoughts, Cam?
So Danny Jansen was on my team for a little while as a prospect. I traded him to Conor at the 2018 deadline, and what's really turning into a huge ripoff. I acquired Tatis and Sixto Sanchez for a bunch of nothing. Brian Hayes, I sent him in that deal, but there wasn't much in there going to Conor. I'm not sure what Conor's going. I guess Conor has Joey Bart coming up at catcher. He probably thinks that he'll be his catcher of the future because the only other catcher on his roster is Wilson Ramos, and he really struggled this year.
Yeah, I feel like Joey Bart's close to hitting that MLB at-bat threshold to not be a prospect in our league anymore. So that makes sense. I know Sahil is one team in our league that refuses to roster more than one catcher, so we might just have another team like that coming in.
Yeah, possibly. I normally had one catcher until I kind of realized that Carson Kelly wasn't very reliable anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Joey Bart, my God, 36.9% strikeout rate, 2.7% walk rate in 33 games this year. He's going to have to turn it around.
Yeah, he's going to have to turn it around big time. Top number 5 prospect for Fangraphs in the entire league. But if you look closer, a lot of that's riding on the fact that they have him as a 70 future value fielder. The 45 future value hit tool came through big time last year, clearly. He apparently has not tapped fully into that power yet, especially at this level. But in fairness, he never played at AAA. He had 22 games at AA.
That's true. It's tough to judge a lot of guys who came up this year, skipping multiple levels. And one more thing about Conor's team: if Wilson Ramos doesn't land a starting job somewhere, he can always just ask Yuki for a trade because he's got about 15 catchers.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah. Are there any other notable cuts that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I'll take a quick little look at Roberto Osuna got dropped. Similar thing to Ken Giles. I'm not sure if somebody's going to sign him or not. Addison Russell's not getting any run in the league right now. I know Osuna is a better player than Addison Russell, but I think it makes sense that Sahil's trying to pick him up and deal him right now. But I think it'd probably make more sense for a team that's lower in the league to pick him up off of free agency. I would not spend a pick on him right now and hold him and see what happens. I think that would be a great idea for one of the rebuilding teams.
Yeah, I agree. Sahil's just kind of been adding and dropping a lot of these guys. He cut Michaelis to pick up Ozuna, and he cut Nick Whitgren for the spot after claiming that he could probably get a second rounder for him. Ozuna in particular, out of those a couple guys I just mentioned, I think is most likely to net some sort of return. I don't know how he keeps doing this, getting guys for guys he picks up off waivers. I know it's partly my fault.
I do want to send into the league chat the GIF from Breaking Bad where Aaron Paul as Jesse Pinkman yells, "He can't keep getting away with it."
Well, in a couple days when he trades Ozuna for a high second rounder.
Yeah, then we can send it in. Speaking of guys who got a second round pick, Mike Minor has now been dropped by you and then picked up by Jake and Clayton, who dropped Robbie Grossman, who was great this year. Do you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, he was. Robbie Grossman's a guy I asked about a couple times during the season. I didn't think there was much of a spot on my team for him. But yeah, he slugged 482. He hit 12 doubles, which I guess doubles seem to be the if you can find a guy who can consistently hit doubles, that's how you win this league. But yeah, Robbie Grossman, little surprised they dropped him, but they've got a good lineup, and they have a good pitching staff too, especially if Minor can do something for him.
I agree. Do you have any final guys that you want to take a look at from the drops, or?
Yeah, maybe let's mention Hunter Dozier. Alex dropped him, and he was another guy Clayton and Jake added. He's owned in 54.5% of leagues. He's still at a 349 on base percentage this year, which is a lot better than a lot of the guys who we've mentioned. He was especially great in I'm on Brian Dozier's Fangraphs page. Hold on. Yeah, he was especially great in 2019. He was a waiver claim for me, and I turned him into something good. And even this year, he wasn't terrible. The slugging went way down. The exit velocity went way down. But he still has a very high walk rate, and I think I was a little bit surprised to see him cut.
Yeah, I agree. The extra base hit numbers this year were not there. 4 doubles and 6 home runs is not going to cut it for a roster spot in this league, even if you're contributing a few steals. But I understand why you'd want to roster him going into next year. I have liked what I've seen from him as somebody that watches quite a few Royals games, and he's not going to turn 30 until later next season in late August. So it's a compelling guy to look at. He was really good in 2019.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's still a guy worth rostering. That may have been part of the reason why Bo with the Flow felt they could cut Robbie Grossman.
Yeah, I think so too. And that ad led to Colin Moran getting cut, who will inevitably end back up with Eric for a day or two on a matchup somewhere here or there, and maybe even end up with one of the lower level teams in the league in case one of those teams want to gamble on him having a slightly higher on base percentage, maybe just because looking at his makeup, he can play third and first, which is very helpful. And last year he posted 10 doubles and 10 home runs, which is borderline rosterable even for a team like myself.
Yeah, I agree. I'd be happy to have him on my bench. I believe he was on Connor's team for a very long time.
Yeah, he was there for a long time after I don't remember what deal I sent him to Connor in, but he held him for a while and watched to see where he went.
All right. So yeah, Zane, do you want to explain what we're going to be doing for the rest of the episode today?
Yeah, so coming up now, we are going to go through the past 3 years in the season. We have now gone through 3 full seasons. Well, not full seasons, but we've gone through 2 full seasons and a pandemic season in this league. And we're going to take a look at the records of teams each year. I know that we did Roto this past season. That's okay. I'm going by the all-time records. that we have in here. And I guess I do want to look at what records would have been last season, even though we need to put a huge asterisk on that because a lot of our teams, including myself and Eric and others, were playing solely to the roto standings. But yeah, we're going to look at the first 2 years in this league, see how everyone did those first 2 seasons, look at our overall records, and see which way we're trending. I personally kind of have an idea in my head of where each team in this league is trending, and I'm curious to hear your opinion on that, Cam, and maybe we can even spark some controversy in the channel and maybe even spur up a little trade storm with teams that don't like what we have to say.
Yeah, I think so. And you want to start? So we're going to go in ascending order of me and Sahil's combined power rankings. So the first team we'll talk about is Andrew, ranked 12th by both of us. And yeah, Zane, what has been the trajectory of this team, and who has it been owned by in the past? Because I keep forgetting.
Yeah, so Andrew's team was originally owned by AJ and M-SABR when the league started. And the first season for this team back in 2018, under the North Korea administration, went 9-11-1. They finished number 9 in the league. Last season, the I'm Like That roster of this team went 6-15-1. And that was actually tied with the Killer Bees in the in the one division, and this team finished number 10 in the league. You were number 11. You must have had a tiebreaker or something.
Yeah.
So far we've seen a number 9 finish, a number 10 finish, and this year the number 1 overall pick and the worst team in the league. I actually think this team has been trending down since the draft or so. And right now, I think they are the worst team in the league. Still, even with the work that Andrew is doing to start rebuilding this roster, it gives me the vibe of the 2017 Tigers, where they just traded away, allowed their best players, and now they are starting from scratch. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. They've definitely been trending downwards, and this is presumably their rock bottom, although there's no real way to tell. I think what I want to do in this series is just kind of look at the team's draft as well and see where who their top guys were and see if that kind of put them in an early hole. And this team, Carlos Correa, Gary Sanchez, Charlie Blackmon were their first 3 picks. None of their first 6 are still with the team. They traded Charlie Blackmon fairly early, I believe. Carlos Correa, they were called North Korea for quite a while, but but Andrew was the one who traded him away as part of a massive, massive deal, netting him the likes of Sean Manaea, Jose Urquidy, and a bunch of picks. Overall, he still owns Keone Kela, his 24th round pick. That's surprising. But
Wow.
AJ and Max did not know anything about prospects, and that kind of showed. They don't have a single Michael Chavis, Colby Allard, John Duplantier, some of their guys. So I think that put the team in a big hole, I would say, just in terms of having guys to trade away to improve the team or to kind of build a farm system around. Because right now, Andrew's farm system is near the bottom of the league too.
Yeah, if you look at the inaugural draft for this team, Carlos Correa might be the worst first-round pick of the bunch. I know he's a good player, but he has not been the regular season player that anybody has wanted him to be. Even Sahil has been a bit underwhelmed with Correa on his roster. Gary Sanchez has trended down a bit each year. Charlie Blackmon as a 3rd-round pick was bold at the time, and right now he is performing well for me, but he's aging. And Chris Archer and D. Gordon as the 4th and 5th-round picks were awful.
Yeah.
That's rough. You guys picked, like, just looking right next to AJ and Max in that draft, you guys took Byron Buxton and Brian Dozier, which really didn't work out.
Hey, we got a good return for Brian Dozier.
That's true. But those Chris Archer and D. Gordon or Anthony Rendon and Justin Verlander, who would you rather have?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So
there.
this was a rough inaugural draft. Marcus Stroman hasn't really been the fantasy guy you want. Kyle Seager's kind of bounced around the league. Adam Jones isn't even in baseball. Well, he's in baseball, but it's overseas. And in general, you go down this entire draft, most of these guys got traded too early in the case of like an Alex Verdugo, or they never had a chance. In the bottom of this draft, especially, you're just not, it is awful.
Yeah. Yusniel Diaz, I think, was a decent pick at the time, but like, Chris
Yeah.
Shaw, who is Chris Shaw?
Chris Shaw, Brad Miller. I get that that's the 40th round. The 40th round really had some chaotic picks.
But like, Chris Shaw was taken 3 rounds before Pete Alonso.
Yeah, and Chris Shaw was taken right around, either right before or right after Ian Anderson was selected. So yeah, this draft was rough. I think this is rock bottom for this roster. And if we're looking, I'm not a big fan of this farm right now. I think it has a long way to go, and that's not Andrew's fault necessarily. A lot of that has to do with what he inherited, but adding Torkelson will be a nice start. There are some other future picks that I think are going to help build this up, but Andrew's going to have to trade like a madman to take this back into even the playoff picture, in my opinion. Just looking at how the top teams in this league have been able to retool and preserve their windows.
I agree. The number 11 team on our power rankings is Connor's team, the Off-White Sox, and they've been trending upwards a bit, wouldn't you say?
I agree that this team is trending up. If you look at Connor's farm, you have a lot of guys that I think could end up being pretty high impact. Not every guy in this farm really excites me, to be totally honest. But the fact that you have young pitchers such as Tristan McKenzie, Nate Pearson, Michael Kopech, Forrest Whitley, DL Hall, all in the same farm system, those are guys that a lot of people in this league are going to be interested in, whether that's when they inevitably make it to the majors or even right now. There is value in that farm, and the starting pitching prospects in this league are few and far between. Similarly, the major league roster is starting to turn around, and it's going to be better than it has been the first 3 years. Connor has averaged, he's just by far been the worst team in the league so far. As bad as Andrew has been, or that roster has been over 3 years, Andrew's team has a all-time record of 15, 26, and 2. Conor has compiled a 6-35-3 record so far.
Wow.
Yeah, it has been awful. This team has not helped itself either by finishing in spots where, well, the first 2 years finishing last in the league, but this season not having as good of a pick. I don't know. I think it's trending in the right direction, but I still have them like pretty comfortably. I have Conor and Conor comfortably in 11th right now, in my opinion, and a step above Andrew, but a step below the next tier of teams. But I think there's going to be some exchange between those two groups, the tier that's right above him and Conor.
I agree. And last week I talked about how Conor really could have a sneaky high ceiling this year. And the one thing about Connor's team that you talk about is how we screwed him in the draft. But you kind of look, he got a lot of guys who were sneaky good, certainly better than the guys he gave the Cohens. His top 5 picks: Turner, Bellinger, Moncada, great. Bumgarner's a big miss in the 4th round, but Yu Darvish in the 5th is great. Will Myers was fine this year. Gene Segura in the 8th isn't a terrible pick. Moustakas in the 10th isn't a terrible pick. Janelson Lamet in the 13th. And there are a few, and even when you're trying to screw with him, Walker Buehler in the 17th is great. Chris Davis.
Tristan McKenzie in the 20th.
Tristan McKenzie in the 20th. Mitch Keller in the 24th. Jorge Soler we were screwing with him when he gave him that pick.
And Jorge Soler is like the face of Eric's unlikely success.
Yeah. Max Kepler, Kyle Lewis, even, God, Carson Kelly.
Brandon Woodruff in the 36th round.
God. And
Shane
then
Baz right after.
Dane Dunning.
God, we rewarded him.
We did. We didn't. I mean, Mark Appel last, but compared to Team Cohen, and even Team Cohen, we gave Luis Robert,
Yeah.
but and Tyler Glasnow in late. Um, but my God, I don't remember what the thought process was giving Connor Walker Bueller, especially since we immediately gave Carlos Rodon to Alex and Jake, who was a bust at the time.
Yeah.
But Connor Renfro, we haven't even mentioned. Connor's team, Connor had a better draft than AJ and Max, I would say.
Yeah, I would
Looking
agree.
back.
I think that Connor has had some of the better trades in this league, actually looking back as well. But what has doomed him into this rebuild was just over rebuilding. After a while, you got to kind of say, I picked up Juan Soto. Wow, I have Juan Soto. Keep Juan Soto. Or
Absolutely.
you traded him for Tatis. Wow, I have Tatis. Keep Tatis. Or wow, I traded for Wander Franco. Keep Wander Franco. And I understand that he's trying to do what Andrew essentially needs to do now. And in times it has worked, but I think in other times it has slowed this rebuild. But I'm glad to see his team starting to build into a stronger overall roster, even though I do not want to see him as good in this league as he is in the football league.
Oh, he's good in the football league? I have no idea.
Right now, I think he might be one of the top one or two teams in the league.
Wow, way to go, Connor.
Yeah.
Side note, at the end of the football season, we should try and get Max Smith on this podcast to just do one episode about that.
That'd be so funny.
Yeah. Okay, so that's Connor and Connor. The number 10 team by our combined rankings was Daniel and Alex, the team formerly known as Team Cohen. As we've mentioned, what direction has this team been going?
Yeah, when it comes to the Fighting Bellies, I am actually probably the biggest proponent of them that you're going to hear on this podcast, because Sahil and Cam, you both have him number 10. And I think I had him in one of my rankings as high. I had these two as high as like fringe playoff team. In fact, I do have them as a fringe playoff team. I think they're a tick above, maybe even Team Resnick at the moment, which I know you will not agree with because you like their roster more than mine. But I think the Fighting Bellies can end anywhere from 5th team in the league to the 11th team in the league. And that is because this team, if you look close, or if you look at a broad scope, they're trending down. And Daniel and Alex are the least active owners in this league. It's almost like watching your favorite team when you just want the owner to sell the team. But I don't know if it's that bad. And I think that there has been some good, there has been some thought process behind their moves, or their lack thereof moves. Nolan Arenado and Cody Bellinger are two superstars on that roster. And I know a lot of people are probably thinking, why don't you trade one of those guys? You can get a haul for them and kickstart a rebuild. But I think if you wait a little longer, they might rebuild their value to a bit higher than it is right now, especially Cody Bellinger. And I think that's worth doing. Daniel and Alex have gone 18-24 all time so far in this league. Team Cohen finished the first season in this league 9-12. The second season, the Fighting Bellies finished last in their division, 9-13. And I don't remember where did they finish in the Roto standings. They were 10th. So a lot of that is not paying attention to your team as the season goes on, because there is talent there. They finished 4th in runs. They finished 4th in on-base percentage. And they had enough pitching to be in the conversation for like average if they would have just focused more on getting the quality starts into the lineup and getting the holds into the lineup. They didn't even try with holds, honestly. And you can't punt a statistic if you're not doing like full daily roster management a la Eric. So I don't know. I personally think there's talent on this roster. If I were one of the like young members in M-SABR looking to inherit a team in this league, you're not getting most of the teams, but if like, let's say like the bottom 4 or 5 teams became available, I would actually want the Fighting Bellies. So take that as you will.
Yeah, I was actually just going to say that pretty much word for word. If I was a freshman in M-SABR, someone reached out to me asking me to join the league and saying this team is available, I would be more than happy to take over it because there is a lot of talent there, even if they're not actually managing the team day to day. And the draft, the things we did to the Coens in this draft, my God. The first few rounds, Arenado, Kershaw, Strasburg, great, yeah. And then JD Martinez, Jose Abreu, pretty good. Buster Posey, a reach in the 6th round. And then we really started messing with them. Billy Hamilton in the 8th, come on. Jason Kipnis in the 12th. Adam Duvall. Franklin Barreto was already a bust by that point. Then we just decided, let's give them Frazier and Frazier back to back.
I mean, Cohen and Cohen, Frazier and Frazier.
Exactly. Hanley Ramirez by that point in the 21st round. We were like, let's do Hanley Ramirez and Chris Davis back to back. We're flipping over the page.
right after Josh Hader and Charlie Morton, and like bookended with Kenta Maeda and Matt Chapman were also in the same round.
And then it just gets worse from there. Rick Porcello was a joke. Vince Velasquez in the 28th, come on. But, I mean, they did luck into Tyler Glasnow, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, if you look in those later rounds too, Luis Robert and Jesus Lazaro also went their way. You had the wrong Y. Alvarez. It's we took Yadier Alvarez for them.
Yeah. Alec Hansen I've never heard of. Fernando Romero, I believe, for like a week or so was a sought-after prospect.
Yeah.
Wasn't there something weird going on with him in the league when we look through the chat history?
Yeah, I remember that I did send Fernando Romero as part of one of those deals that built me up from Adames to Kershaw.
Yeah, so he's an interesting guy in that respect at least. But the last 2 rounds, we gave him Brady Aiken, who had already retired. Come on. And the fact that this team went 9-12 the first year is pretty remarkable.
I agree. This team, I don't know. I don't know where they're trending. If they pay attention, could be good. But otherwise, this could be new ownership in a couple of years.
Yeah, I agree. Team in 9th place in our combined rankings, Sahil had him 10th, I had him 7th, is Anthony.
Yeah, Anthony has been successful so far. He was 3rd in the pool division and made the playoffs as like the 5th seed, I think. 2018, 11-9-1 record. Similarly, this team went 12-9-1 in 2019, which puts them the 4th best record in the league. And this past season was tough for them. The transition to Roto did not do them well. They finished with 59 points, and that was one of the biggest gaps in the league, as Clayton and Jake were next, and they had 68. So I personally saw in the Roto standings this year, I thought that I saw Anthony's team take a step back in its overall standing in our league. I don't know what your thoughts are. I just think that the bats are slowly starting to age. There's still a lot of good years for a lot of these guys. But specifically the pitching has kind of taken a step back. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd certainly say they're trending in the wrong direction, even though they do have Mike Trout. Corey Kluber in the 2nd round, kind of a bust, and one of the guys I'm very surprised to see that he didn't cut among his huge list of guys. Not a bad draft. Jake Lamb in the 8th is a reach. Alex Wood in the 11th didn't work out, but Trevor Bauer in the 12th more than made up for it. Alex Colomés bounced around. Brian Healy in the 18th, not the best. Overall, I'd say Anthony, especially for being 1st overall and having to wait so long for his picks, did just about as well as you could expect a team to do in the draft. His late rounds weren't the best, but he did get Pete Alonso in 36th. And I believe Jaime Barria in the 40th was one of the better final round picks in terms of turning into something or other.
Yeah.
Yeah, in general, his team's certainly trending the wrong way, but I like enough of the guys on the roster to think he can turn it around.
Yeah, I would like to see Anthony a little more active on the trade market when guys catch fire. Specifically, I think I have not given him enough credit overall in certain areas, because if you look at some of the pitching on this team, Christian Javier is looking pretty good so far. I am worried about Charlie Morton just because not a great regular season, and he's going to retire anytime now. Mike Soroka should be fine off of the injury, but even so, I am slightly concerned that he has outperformed his peripherals so far. Still going to be good. Don't get me wrong. James Paxton can't stay healthy and has been bad. AJ Puck can't stay healthy so far. Carlos Martinez has kind of fallen apart. He's going to need some guys to pan out. He's going to need Dane Dunning and Tarek Skubal to take a step up. He's going to need maybe even Corey Kluber to have a bounce back season, which I don't know if he has it in him. And I think you need to, with this team, if a guy like Ramon Laureano has a big season next year out of nowhere, well, not out of nowhere, but if he has like an even bigger season than you'd expect from a guy of his caliber right now, maybe deal him. Needs to start creating some value. And I think right now the aging and falling apart with injuries of some of these guys has outweighed the value that he has created with pickups, whether that be on free agency or on the trade market. And I think if this trend continues, he's going to fall into the lower category of not even in the playoff picture. I think he's taken a step back from definite playoff contender to fringe playoff contender already.
Yeah, I agree. I love how in the draft sheet it's still Anthony/Michael, Mr. Resnick himself.
Team, I love and hate that this is still Team Resnick. I also do want to add, I did mention this to a few people in the league, including you, Cam, the other day, but I did find out that Jake Cohen does exist, and he is co-president of the Soccer Analytics Club. That is part of M-SAS now. So score one for Team Cohen. I know Alex Cohen, we all knew does exist. And I think I've seen on LinkedIn that he's doing some cool stuff too. So
yeah, maybe in his Dynasty Premier League, he showed up to the draft.
True.
That'd be tough to do with players coming in and out from other leagues, but that's a discussion for another time.
Yeah.
What we have at number 9 is the team that has had the most turnover, but they've had the same name through it all. That's Moneyball.
Yeah, Yuki, this team all time has a 23-20-2 record, including 2 playoff losses. One of those coming in the Griffin and Matthew Kicker administration, and one of these coming under Yuki. So this is the hardest team in the league for me to gauge right now. Sahil and I have had a lot of conversation in our gossip about the league. And Sahil is of the belief that Yuki should try to become more like my team and bullpen it up. And I am of the belief that I have no idea what I would do with this roster, except that there are some really interesting bats that might be worth flipping, including, Suarez, Real Muto, Harper. I know that these guys are like mainstays that someone like myself on an EBO roster would not even like really want to consider trading away. But I think this team could be in need of a little bit of a talent infusion to turn things up a notch. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I've given my thoughts on the team as it stands right now, and basically the answer is I don't know. I'm constantly surprised that this team made the playoffs the first year, but I guess there were only 3 good managers that year, and then this team slotted in 4th. They drafted all right. They got Bryce Harper 2nd overall. Syndergaard was a great pick for the end of the 2nd round, and then Saleson, O'Donnellson, all still good contributors. Rougned Odor less so. It kind of falls apart in the middle rounds. Miguel Cabrera in the 10th is not great. Real Muto in the 12th is good, but Lewis Brinson, 2-time reigning Gallardo Award winner in the National League, in the 13th is a big whoop. Although the 13th round in general kind of blows, which is funny. The
13th round was awful.
Yeah, wow. Bradley Zimmer, not great. Marcus Semien would have been good for him if he got anything for him.
Yeah.
Ooh, Felipe Rivero, a.k.a. Felipe Vasquez in the 18th. That is a big yikes.
Yeah, that is tough.
Oof.
Brad Hand in the next round does recover that. And for a while, this team did have that absolutely fire bullpen.
They really did.
And they had Sean Doolittle when he was at his best too. But I don't know. This draft kind of falls apart in the second half.
Was
Kenta
Ryan
Maeda,
Madsen even in the league? when they drafted him in the 29th?
I don't know. He must have been. I do remember Max being just like, fuck Ryan Madsen. Ryan
Wow.
Madsen's my least favorite player of all time.
Yeah,
and there was
I
not a
agree.
chance that we ever drafted him. But I don't know. That same round we picked up Matt Manning, so that's pretty nice.
Yeah, not bad. That round I took Brian Dunsing because he was a big guy that Duncan liked, and we cut him pretty quickly.
Cubs bias.
Yeah. Getting Bobby Bradley and Brandon Marsh in the final 2 rounds is not bad at all. Yeah, he held on to Bobby Bradley for a while, only trading him to Sahil in the Miguel Sano trade fairly recently. Brandon Marsh has bounced around a little bit, but he's turned into a decent prospect. And Miguel Andujar in the 28th is solid, but overall, this draft falls apart just like so many of ours.
Yeah, a lot of the drafts. I mean, it's a given that you're going to have some busts towards the end. But this draft specifically did not give this team the necessary talent to really, just to put it bluntly, win a playoff game so far. I do appreciate that this team has now gone to the playoffs twice. I do appreciate Yuki's constant effort to improve his team, and that's why I'm willing to put this team higher than a couple of other rosters that I might like a tiny bit more. But we'll see where this team goes.
Yeah, I agree. Yuki's been a great addition to the league, and he seems like there aren't going to be any more changes to the ownership in that team, which is good. It's nice to have some stability there. Up next, we have Alex and Zach's team. I don't remember who originally. Oh, that was originally Max and Teo's team.
Yeah, that was Max and Teo's team. And Acuna Matata minus Acuna has gone 16-24-4 all time with a single playoff loss. Looking at this team's draft, I do remember they had Ramirez and Lindor at the turnaround, which was great. And then Contreras and Acuna at the next turnaround, which is great.
Terrific.
And then Nola and Ray the next time, which was, should have kept Nola.
Yeah, Robbie Ray somehow they still own, which is wild to me.
That's incredible. This draft was actually, there's a lot to like in this draft. Michael Conforto, Michael Kopech. I would have held on to Fernando Tatis in the 15th round. Mike
Carlos Santana.
Right
Max Brill is very good at this, is what we're saying.
Yeah, Max Brill was really good at drafting this early on. They even got this was a weak second half draft too, in my opinion. But even in the second half, they were able to pick up Blake Treinen right before his big season. Lance Lynn, as well as trade star Blake Parker and Joe Adell. So
wow, Joe Adell in the 36. Good for them.
Yeah, this team was mismanaged because there was so much talent on this team. And now Alex and Zach have willed it back to a respectable spot because they have been able to figure out good trades throughout the league. But man, if they had this roster instead of the roster that they inherited, this would be an even better squad right now.
I mean, they're the ones who traded me Lindor. They're the ones who traded away Acuna. But
you know what? You're right. If current Alex and Zach inherited the team instead of past Alex and Zach.
Yeah, maybe Zach's the one. I don't think I've ever met him, but maybe he's the one who's kind of been behind the turnaround.
I don't know. Yeah, because I know Alex does a lot of the negotiations, but I think Zach must keep him honest at times with some more bold deals that go down. They have been a lot better recently. I thought the Lindor deal was awful. Turning Acuna into Betts is actually, in my opinion, fine, but what they traded Betts away for, I still think that was probably the ripoff of the year this past year. I don't know. This team is looking pretty good. I think the Manny Machado deal actually was very much a win-win. The lineup, though, at the moment looks okay, and the pitching looks good for this year, but it's a very weird pitching rotation just because you look and there's some age mixed in with some younger guys, and I think this is like a team that will be medium term right now, but they need some work to be long term, and they're not quite there in the short term.
Yeah, certainly. And certainly along with Yuki's team, another difficult team to place. But yeah, like you said, they're right on the fringe. And now we head into teams that we do expect to make the playoffs. And the number 6 team by me and Sahil's composite rankings is Clayton and Jake, formerly Clayton and Ryan.
Yeah, Clayton and Jake for me are one of the top 6 teams as well. I could see them finishing anywhere from 3rd to 8th next year. I know that there's a chance for maybe any team that gets into the playoffs to have a good couple weeks and win it all. So I will give that to them as well. But this feels like a team that's trending in the right direction. So far this year, or so far in the league, they have gone 22, 20, and 2, which, hey, they,
Middle of the pack.
yeah, not, and like the best part about it is they have a winning record so far, and they have not won a playoff game, but they're moving in the right direction. Do you have any thoughts about their roster?
Yeah, this is a roster that me and Sahil have talked a lot about, just because Sahil really likes their roster and what they're doing. Let's look back at the draft again. They have 4 guys left from their draft, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it kind of is compared to some of the other teams. Machado in the first has kind of been up and down. Corey Seager's been up and down, but both of those guys look good right now, not that they're on their team anymore. Rhys Hoskins in the third, Ozuna in the fourth. Justin Upton in the fifth is their first big miss, especially since Aaron Nola was taken immediately after. Tyone didn't turn out great, but he still got that great upside. Addison Russell in the 9th round is a big miss. And then even if they got Giolito after the turn, even though they did hit on Gore and Bichette back-to-back in the 19th and 20th right before we flipped the page over.
Yeah, that's absolutely stellar. And I think that part right there, if you go down the rest of their draft, there isn't really any guy, in my opinion, that sticks out. Maybe Austin Riley, because Ruiz is still on the roster, but I don't expect too much from him, especially with the fact that he's a catcher. Those are so risky. You're not going to have many Will Smiths out there. But what I want to say is Mackenzie Gore and Bo Bichette are the heart of this team, I think, going forward. And I really think they nailed their early picks, but did not quite hold on to the right guys at the right times at all moments. Especially this team did have DJ LeMahieu at one point too, which would have been really good to, like, if you have that guy still right now. But if you look up and down the lineup right now, I don't know. It's pretty good. I don't like Nico Horner. But besides that, maybe Hunter Dozier bounces back and all of a sudden you are cooking.
Yeah, I agree. And I think maybe with the exception of my team and maybe a couple others, this team hit on a higher percentage of their prospects.
Yes.
Just in terms of them continuing to be good. Mackenzie Gore and Bo Bichette. But also Austin Riley remained a top prospect for a while. Hans Kraus, Darwinson Hernandez, maybe not. But Keibert Ruiz is still a top prospect. And just having 3 or 4 of your guys be good is good enough compared to, say, what other teams did. And I think drafting relievers in the 39th and 40th is a solid strategy, even if they did burn a pick on Greg Holland in the 25th, who apparently was a free agent at the time. And up to number 5, it's Eric's team. Me and Sahil have talked a lot about this team and the direction it's trending, but you haven't shared your thoughts. What do you think about Eric's team?
Yeah, so Eric, perfect 5-0 playoff record, 2 titles, 34, 9, and 5 all-time record. That is the best record in the league. If we're not looking at the fake games that were played this past season, Sahil's gone 37, 10, and 1, which is more wins, fewer ties. But anywho, Eric so far has been a regular season beast. He's been a playoff monster. And I think the roster's gotten a bit worse. It got a bit worse from year 1 to year 2. I think it got quite a bit worse the next offseason. And right now, I still think this is a team that could do a lot. And I have them anywhere from another title to early playoff exit. I'd be shocked if they miss the playoffs with Eric's very attentive management. But I think it's trended down a little bit, and I think we're about to see it trend back up. The reason I say that is just because I really, really think Eric's one of the most involved teams in the league. He has made a couple moves, I think, this offseason already that you will look back at and say, oh, that was a smart move. Like the Ozuna deal might be the one I regret most out of the whole bunch. Even if Ozuna's become one of my guys where I'm just like, I want to leave him and see where he goes this season. I really like that move for him. But I don't know. Last offseason, moves like buying Ohtani for Blackman and Strasburg was rough. And there were a couple moves like that in there, and I'm not quite with this roster as much as I was a couple of years ago. I'm worried about him one-on-one because I think he has the flexibility to go against a weird strategy more than some other teams, especially because he doesn't have like a starting pitching log jam like a couple of teams in this league, which isn't a bad thing. It just means you are set in one strategy. But yeah, I know you guys have similar thoughts, but if you have anything you want to add that you haven't said before, Cam, that's what I got.
Yeah, I've pretty much said it all. And I'd say the only reason that I think there isn't much of a chance he misses the playoffs is just because of his good management and his flexibility. Looking at his draft, Stanton in the first round after his 2017 season, sure felt like a good pick at 10, but maybe hasn't been since then that great. But Rizzo DeGrom to 3 is good. I don't think he drafted that much better than other teams. Trevor Story in the 7th is good, but he took A.J. Pollock and Chris Davis in the 5th and 6th round. It's not like he's drafting incredibly.
Yeah, Chris Davis was huge in that first title run. He was absolutely massive fantasy-wise in 2018. But I think he did a good mix of getting guys that gave him that early performance boost and getting guys that he's been able to trade and even preserve on his roster for later. Because you're just looking down the list. I mean, he also took Matt Olson, Whit Merrifield were good picks. There's a little stretch where like Evan Gaddis, Corey Knebel, Jose Peraza, Delino DeShields, those were not really good picks, any of them. Drew Pomeranz and Dylan Betances got results for him, but there were better guys available. But hey, if you look around look at who's been drafted around those guys, pretty good. In fact, he built up a pretty strong bullpen in general, just around those two guys. Charlie Morton later, Jack Flaherty later. As you go down, gets weaker, just like everybody else. But he snuck in Sandy Alcantara.
Yeah, we pointed this out, but he just took a bunch of Marlins at the end of the draft.
Yes, and Tigers. Christian Stewart and Bo Burrows too, which did not work.
His last 3 picks were Marlins starters, and then another Marlins starter, and then a few Marlins outfielders, and a couple of Tigers starters and outfielders. It's just a weird, but it didn't work out any better or worse than anyone else's end of the draft, and that's what's amazing about it.
Yeah, he really screwed around for the last 10 rounds, maybe even 12 rounds of this draft, and still got out fine, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, up into the top 4 now, teams that we expect to have advantages in the first round, and that would be Ruthvik's team. I had him 4th, Sahil had him 5th, and this was originally Kyle's team.
Yes, and I do remember year 1, Kyle was awful year 1. They finished 5-15-1, which was second worst in the league. Year 2, this roster finished better than that. I mean, it's hard not to, but big bounce back to 12-10. And this past season, the 4th place finish. So trending up. I think we might have seen a first little peak for this team, and they might have a slightly worse 2021 after the immaculate 2020. Of course, I don't expect Shane Bieber, Jacob deGrom to regress much, if at all. But I don't know. A lot of these guys performed very, very, very well in 2020, and not all of them are going to replicate that performance this next year.
Yeah, I agree. I just want to say that Ruthvik has done an incredible job of rebuilding this team because it was very empty when he got it.
Absolutely.
And
he did inherit like the first 3 picks, Mookie, Bregman, Devers. Whew, nailed it.
Yeah.
But yeah, he had some work to do. Absolutely.
He did. Daniel Murphy in the 5th. Kyle loves Daniel Murphy. So that was rough. Alex Reyes in the 9th didn't work out, and he took Eric Hosmer in the 7th. Like I remember the clapping about Eric Hosmer. Like, yeah, we don't like Eric Hosmer, but he's being picked just to stop the bleeding or whatever. But in my mind, it's like the 12th or 13th round. No, this was the 7th round. Trevor Story was the pick taken right after. That's rough.
Trevor Story going right after was, yeah. Oh, yeah. And then in the 11th round, Francisco Mejia goes like pretty early. I know he was a big prospect at the time, but I don't know. Still a stretch that early.
Same with Orlando
And
Arcia.
David Price goes right after and had a couple nice years out of that.
Yeah. Orlando Arcia won before Julio Urias. Not great. Sonny Gray, I mean, now would be looking now, 12th round is a good pick for him. But back then, he was not good in 2018, and he didn't have him anymore, and he sold low on him, so it doesn't matter anyway.
Yeah.
Jason Groom is somehow still on that team.
Yeah.
In general, not a terrible back of the draft. Getting Keston Hiura in the 32nd, Helio Ramos in the 35th isn't bad. Jason Hayward, even in the 34th, is better than might be the best 34th round pick out of anyone, with the exception of maybe Sahil getting Ryan Mountcastle. And
yeah, Mountcastle might
Tyler
be.
Mahle, maybe.
Yeah, and even we ended up taking Estevan Florial there, which we dealt at a proper time when his value was still high, so that worked out okay. But yeah, in terms of player, Jason Hayward's probably the second best in that bunch.
Yeah, overall a better back of the draft, even with Jose Batista in there, than a lot of teams. And I think Hiura getting the call to the majors has helped with Ruth Vick's turnaround. But in general, yeah, this team is trending upwards a lot.
Yeah, I agree. Let's talk about your team, because your team was number 3 in the composite rankings, and I think there's some definite highs and lows in your draft with Chris Bryant and Aaron Judge. Nice. But then Joey Votto, Buxton, and Dozier. I know you guys got a good deal for Dozier, thankfully, but this is definitely a roller coaster draft, but I think you guys had one of the better back ends.
I agree, and we can talk about the trajectory of my team later, but I'm still happy with how my team drafted. I mean, Bryant, 4th overall, maybe wasn't the best, but Judge in the 2nd round when he's healthy is great. Votto, I think we traded alongside Buxton. I'm not sure. But either way, Buxton, Dozier, 4 or 5, not good. But then Vlad and Gallo were still on the team. And then we were kind of panicking at that point. When should we take our first starting pitcher? When should we do it? And Jose Barrios we waited until the 8th round to take his starting pitcher.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. And if Sahil had taken Barrios, we would have probably passed again and taken, I don't know who we wanted.
Maybe Luis Castillo was there, but that's a stretch.
Yeah,
we took Salazar the next round, so.
But we did really well with prospects. I mean, Gleyber Torres in the 11th, Forrest Whitley in the 16th, Willie Calhoun back when he had value. He's still, according to Ruth Vick, has value. Woo-hoo! But Hunter Green, Royce Lewis, Taylor Trammell, Mike Soroka in the 32nd. We did phenomenally in terms of drafting guys. Even Blake Rutherford turned out well for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's why you guys are now in the top 3 of the league, because, I mean, if you look at your record so far, 13, 29, and 3 is actually worse than Andrew, but you guys intentionally tanked. So that helped.
Yeah, well. And I think you really would have to not be paying attention to think that, my team has been bad the entire time. They were bad the first year, but we sold everything midway. Second year, it caused a real stir because we were probably the 5th or 6th best team that year. We just got off to a rough start and figured we'd rather have Adley.
Yep.
And then this year, it all kind of came together, and we're expecting it to come together even more this coming year.
Yeah, and I think you guys are trending. That you are trending up. This is one of the nicer combinations of a farm system and a major league roster. Though I did not mention this when we were talking about Eric. Eric currently actually has my favorite farm in the league, which is nuts because he had no farm system.
At one point, he had 0 points, I believe, in my farm system rankings.
At one point, he had 0 points, and all of a sudden, I think he's my favorite farm. But if he's my favorite, then you're probably my second favorite. And I like a lot of the guys that you have on your roster. You have some youth with Vlad Jr., Alec Baum, Trent Grisham. You have other guys. So Juan Soto, come on. Yeah. You have really, really strong like mid-age players too. And the rotation is one of the 3 power rotations in the league. So absolutely, this is trending up.
Absolutely. And yeah, let's transition from my team to your team. I know me and Sahil have talked about your team probably more than every other team combined. Uh, but let's still get into it. It's worth talking about how they've been trending, and I'd say they've been very, very steady the entire time. Would you agree? Except for maybe a week at the beginning of the Roto season.
Oh yeah, the beginning of the Roto season was just comical. Like how it was like when you see like one like sometimes that happens in real life, or like one of the best teams just like has a horrible, god awful start, and we had to literally like inject talent into the team to get it kick started. And hey, we came a day away from the championship, which was almost a worst to first run. And I think we might actually have saved ourselves from trending down after the season by pivoting with the old starters into a bullpenning strategy and a just absolutely loaded offense. So I don't know. It would be hard to say we're trending up at the moment, though. If we win a title, then I guess we can say in retrospect then that we did trend up. But right now, I'd agree with holding steady, just doing it in the weirdest ways possible. And we have to, because otherwise this team was built to have an old pitching rotation, young hitters, and figure it out in a few years. I hope I figured it out.
Your draft, pretty solid for the most part. Goldschmidt in the first round isn't bad. Benintendi, I mean, I thought it was.
Thank God I got value for him.
I thought it was a great pick at the time. In retrospect, not so much.
Scherzer in the moment we took him.
Scherzer in the third, I remember distinctly. That was signaling that you were going to go all in from the start. And then Rendon, Verlander, great picks. And then followed
the 3rd through 7th was like massive for us, because Scherzer, Rendon, Verlander were like our 3 best players the first 3 years. Ohtani was all of the swag we ever needed. And then we flipped him into Blackmon and Strasburg, which is huge to our current roster. And then Ozzie Albies was like, oh, we do have a young piece. Surprise.
And just the drafting of Ohtani, one of the best moments in M-SABR history. And the reason for the name of this podcast, of course. Albies, I was really hoping I could get. Didn't end up happening. I was also really hoping I could get Jonathan Scope, and I was lucky that didn't happen.
Yeah.
And then Luis Castillo in the 9th has been up and down, but a good pick.
Yeah, I think if we had held on to him, that would have been smart, because I knew, like, at the time I was like, I think he's going to get much better soon, but we were trying to, like, win it right then. And that was some rookie management, trading him for Marco Gonzalez, but you know, I think every team's kind of experienced that at some point.
Yeah, I agree. And then I think the big, you got Juan Soto in the 23rd, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, and thankfully we turned him into Trey Turner, because otherwise any other trade would have been not just like bad, but catastrophically bad. Thankfully we added a different top 10 dynasty player. It's just, I'd like to have Juan Soto back.
Yeah, I agree. You took Tim Tebow in the 36th round.
Power move.
He was on our board. We were planning, me and Duncan were planning on taking him in the 40th round. And then you swooped in 5 rounds earlier.
That's so funny.
Pretty funny. Yeah. Max Fried in the 38th. Just one more.
Pick.
Yeah, you were good. You did well with your prospects.
Yeah, and the funny thing was that we reached, when we took Brendan Rodgers, we said, oh no, people are starting to take like younger guys. We should take a younger guy. And then we're like, well, who do we take? We don't really have a board. So we looked up the MLB top 100 prospects from Pipeline. We did not know prospects well at the time. We're like, you got to go with the hitter from Colorado, right? I mean, Tulo and then Story. Rodgers is next, right? Well, we flipped him before we saw that's not the case. But yeah, that was the logic there. Willie Adames later was one of the next young picks, but Juan Soto as our number 2 prospect was because of Max. And then we traded him because Max said, it feels like this trade's too lopsided. the classic story.
Yeah.
Matt Manning is still with the team.
Somehow, yeah.
Somehow, some way.
Well, he's your guy now for the future.
Yes. And then number one, we both have, well, I have him 1A in my realistic rankings. And then number two in my super biased rankings, Sahil. And Sahil's draft, I mean, when you have 5 of your first 11 guys still on your roster, you did something right.
Yeah, I mean, God, Altuve, Freeman, Yelich, just terrific first 3 picks right off the bat. Carlos Martinez he missed. And his middle, Michael Fulmer, not the best. His first prospect he took was Victor Robles, which was kind of a miss. There was just kind of a flurry of prospects being taken, and he wanted to get in early, but maybe not the best guy to have taken at the time. Kevin Gausman was a miss. But overall, I mean, getting Suarez in the 18th, there was the whole Chance Sisco drama, if you remember from draft night.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, his draft wasn't anything super special. He got a lot of Orioles prospects and players. Ryan Mountcastle we touched on earlier. Franklin Perez at the time was a good pick, and I believe he got a good return for him. But Sahil's strength was always in his trading, so it's not super surprising to see him just be steady, best team in the league for 3 years while having a solidly average draft.
Yeah, I think what really put Sahil into the spot he's in now. Oh, that was Storm, my dog. But and that was her too. she's hopping all over right now. But what put him into the spot he's in right now has to be the flurry of deals he made after he was so annoyed at the deals that I was making during that first trade deadline. I mean, he picked up like Garrett Cole for like pennies.
Yeah, just his flurries of moves always seem to help him out. And you have him as your 1A. I think I have him number 1. Sahil had him number 1, and it's hard to see him taking a step back anytime this year, maybe even next year.
Yeah, I think he's trending steady right now. It's hard to say that he's going up because that would it's going to be hard for him to get better at this moment. But I think he did help himself from trending down this offseason so far.
I agree. And yeah, do you have anything else you want to say, Zane, before we call it a show?
Looks like Storm really needs to go outside, and I'm going to have to leash her up, especially now that I said the word outside and she is freaking out. But it's been a pleasure doing my first episode as a full guest host.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure having you. And next week we'll have you back as the guest host with Sahil's law school stuff, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too.
All right, go walk your dog.
Okay, yeah, she needs it.
I held the blade in trembling hands, prepared to make it red. Just then the phone rang. I never had the nerve to make the phone.